everybody. I'm getting ready to work on my next Chicks with Tools project, which is this dodgy chair. I'm sure it was lovely in its day, but since it looks like it's been a chew toy for something, and also it became a throne for my daughter's school project when she was Queen Elizabeth I. Well, it took a few hours, but I finally got the chair all prepped for paint, except for one thing, and that was filling in these holes where I had some finials earlier. And the way I did it was just put a little bit of glue in there and then shove toothpicks, as many as I could cram in there. And what that does is it creates wood. And after it's all dry, then I will break these off, sand it down. If I need to put a little wood filler in it, I would. Now, what this is really good for is if you have a hole, like on a hinge, a screw hole or something, or a dresser that is stripped out, then you need to put more wood in there. So you fill the hole like this, and then you drill your new hole for your hinge or whatever screw you need to put in. So really great tip for larger size holes, because you really don't want to use wood filler for something this big. Well, I finally got to the painting phase of this project, and I decided to go with spray paint as an experiment, plus it dries really fast. And I found this primer, so I put 2 coats on here, and then I found this stuff, which it looks like chalk paint, but it's not chalk paint. And I just wanted that kind of look, but again, I was doing a little bit of an experiment, and I think for a lot of things, I still prefer the old-fashioned brushing the paint on, and partly because it's really starts to add up. It gets expensive because each can is $6 to $7, and I used a whole can of primer and almost a whole can of paint, so you do the math. And the other thing is it's hard to touch up after the fact because spray paint has a really smooth finish. So, but anyway, this is my experiment, and I'm moving on to upholstery. It took about an hour, but I finally got the foam carved the way I wanted it to be, and I used this electric knife. I think I've only used it for meat actually one time, but this is even what they use in the fabric store to cut the foam. So anyway, it's a good tool, and if you don't have one and you do want to cut foam, they probably have them at a thrift store. I don't know that a lot of people use them anymore, but I don't think they're terribly expensive to buy either. Okay, so I've taken the next step. I've put the foam on, and then I've covered it with batting. And batting is what you use to fill a quilt. And the reason I've done it is because it smooths out the foam, and then it also creates a layer of white underneath the fabric. And I still didn't like how the foam is green, and I was afraid it was going to show up through the fabric. So I'm taking one more step, and I'm putting a coat of white fabric over the top of it, and I'll staple this around underneath the bottom. And the other thing that will do is I can pull that really tight, whereas I can't pull the batting super tight or else it will tear. So I can pull this really, really tight so that when the chair is all finished, it won't have any wrinkles when people sit down on it. Well, the kids are back in school, so it's time to get started on the actual upholstery part of this chair. And this is a little bit different because, like a normal dining room chair, that's pretty much straight in the front, which makes it pretty easy. But this has a slight curve to it, and it also has the arm, which makes it a little bit more complicated. So instead of working on all 4 sides at once, which I would if it were a square chair, I'm going to do just the front and take care of this curve. So I started by putting a tack staple in the center just to hold things in place, and then I put a staple in on one side and then the other side, and I just keep going back and forth like this. And I want to be sure that my fabric is the same. I have the same allowance, like I have about 1.5 inches here and I have 1.5 inches here, because if you end up with like 2 inches on this side and 1 inch over here, then when you flip the chair over, you're going to realize that everything is crooked. And because I have horizontal stripes, it's really important that they are the same, everything's the same on both sides. So I'll finish this front part up and then I'll move to the back side of the chair. Now that I have the front and the back stapled on, I am working on the arms, and the way to do this is flip the fabric back on itself, but tuck it down as deep as you can in the arm. And then what I'm going to do is slice it right down here, and so that will be able to go around the base of the arm afterwards. So I'm working on the base of the arm, and as you can see, because I slit the fabric, I have to make a decision right here. I can either pull the fabric at an angle this way and then it would somewhat cover up that base, or what I've decided to do is I want to see more of the base, so I've got some spare fabric that I can make a piece to go inside of here, and it will look it'll look pretty good when it's done, and that way this won't be at an angle, it'll be nice and straight, and which is what I want. And also, before I even could do this part over here, I had to go on ahead and cut this part so that everything was a little bit more accurate. This is where I put in that patch. I had to cut the fabric right here to accommodate the arm of the chair. And so instead of stretching the fabric this way and this way, I decided just to put a piece right here. And I think it worked out really well, and nobody's even going to think about it. If it really bothered you if you were doing this, you could always trim it out with something and make it an actual feature, but I didn't really find that necessary. Okay, so I did have the front all stapled the way I wanted it, but what turned out is that when I got over to the side, I had so much extra fabric that to make the stripe straight, I would have had to be doing this kind of, it would have been just kind of a mess. So what I decided to do instead is I pulled out some of the side staples here, and so I am going to pull it down this way, and so there will be this curve right here. I can live with that, and then I'm going to still have to do some pleating on the corner to make it work, but it's better than having so much fabric over to the side. What I did was I first pulled this fairly tight here and I stapled it, then I pulled it tight the way I wanted it here, and then I pleated it and pulled it over to the sides on top. So that's actually a little pleat right there. And I might come back and put a few more staples to tighten it a little bit more. Then I'm going to trim this off right here because this is actually the top of the leg, and I will cover it with some sort of decorative trim so you won't see any of the staples. A few things doing this chair. So first thing is, just like you're doing a rectangular chair, you need to be working on all four sides all at one time. Even if you only have just one staple in the front and the back, I would actually do the sides first and then do the front and the back. And that's only because there are curves on the front and the back of this chair. And your typical dining room chair is more like a trapezoid, and there aren't curves all around it, which makes it so much easier. Plus, usually there's a board, you're taking it off and you're putting foam on it, and you're not having to do it all in place like this. So, so if I were to be doing it again, I would lay all the fabric on, tuck it down the best I could, cut around the arms and legs, and then come back and do all the main stapling. Either way, just don't like hammer in all your staples until you've got it just the way you want it, because you are probably going to end up pulling staples out, because I think I've pulled out probably 2/3 of the staples that I put in this chair originally. So I've got it pretty much where I want it. Now I'm just going to put some trim on it and put the dust catcher on. If you remember at the beginning, I used a piece of aluminum foil, actually 3 pieces of aluminum foil, to make a pattern for the seat cover, which was a really fast and easy way to do it. So I saved it, and now I've put it up to the bottom of my chair, and I've had to bend it back where there are legs, and then I'm going to have to fill in where there are no arms, because this was for the top of the chair. And then I will put it down on a piece of white fabric to use as my dust catcher. I'll let it have a little, like an inch all the way around, so I can fold it under and it'll be nice and clean. And it'll be lickety split, I certainly hope. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the cane back right here. So as you know, it used to be the typical cane back, but I didn't want it to be that anymore. And also there was a hole in it. So I'd been having this idea for a long time of weaving it with something, whether it was yarn or I wasn't sure what. Until I saw on Pinterest a while back that there was this lady who was using scrap fabric, and I love using up scraps of things. And so it was just 2 strands of thin fabric, and you go 3 ways, 3 twists this way, flip it over, 3 twists this way with the other piece, flip it over. Super mindless. You can do it in front of the TV. It does take a long time, but it works. And so I use that to weave through the holes. But the problem was I discovered that the whole caned backing was actually put on slightly tilted, and so the holes didn't line up right, which meant that I had to come up with some sort of whimsical way to weave it. I wasn't just going to do in and out of every hole. And also I needed to fix the actual hole that was in there. Weaving it didn't do the job, so I needed to make a flower or something to cover it up, and I chose flower. So I made a second flower to go on the back so that you don't see the hole on the back side either. And then the reason I put the fringe on here, it's not just a decorative detail, it's a way to mask the fact that the holes are slightly off. So that is the story behind the roping. And you know, some people use this rope, by the way, for like wrapping presents and things like that. But if you have a bunch of scraps, it's a great way to use them up. Well, I am finally finished. So what I have done most recently is make this fringe for the bottom. After I got everything upholstered and got the dust cover on the bottom, it just seemed like it needed a little something. So I took the leftover fabric that I'd cut off of here, and I cut some fringe with it, but the fringe just seemed really flat, and like this kind of piece just looked really flat. And so I wet it and stuck it in the dryer, and it came out nice and curly. And that's the look I wanted, because the rope, because it had been twisted so many times, it has kind of a curly, whimsical look. And so this all ties in then with the back of the chair as well. So the next step is for me to show it to you in the right atmosphere. Well, here we have it, the finished product, and what a transformation this has been. It went from a very traditional mid-century chair with cane backing, then it was Queen Elizabeth I's throne, and now it's a different kind of throne for either a little princess or a grown princess in a home office, or even in a really fun, whimsical bedroom. So let me take you through the steps again. First, I took down everything that was old on the chair, took it off, took out staples, then sanded, painted. Next step was to add webbing, then cut new foam for the seat, add batting, then upholstery. I also wove some rope for the back and wove it in and out of the caning, and then added that flower to cover up the hole. And then the final embellishment was some fringe that coordinated down at the bottom and tied in with the fringe on the back of the chair. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I know it's been a long process, and I promise you not every chair is this complicated. But if you want to purchase this, you can find it on our social media outlets. Thanks for watching.